Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and today I'm going to be getting into my honest thoughts regarding the Nintendo Direct rumor for this week. So a lot of people have been asking about this Direct, a lot of different people have been adding different insiders, asking different people, even asking me, what's going on, is there going to be a big Direct this week? And I figured there's been enough that has happened over the last few days that I should have another conversation about this. I've talked about this multiple times already, but every few days it seems like there's a few more interesting updates that make it worthy of having conversation again on it, so we're having another one here. But I do ask that you listen actively and try and pay attention to the nuance. I find that a lot of people just pay attention to the headlines, make assumptions about the overall conversation, and then go on and start saying things about their assumptions and thus are leading to a spreading of misinformation, saying things that are untrue. For example, I've seen different podcasts or different creators talk about how the rumor has said that Project Legacy or the next new IP from Monolith Soft is about to get announced, and that is not part of the rumor. The rumor is that in the next big General Direct, which supposedly is happening if not in February, in March, will yes have the next announcement from Monolith Soft, but it is not said what that announcement would be. And the other part to the rumor that has everyone excited is that this Direct supposedly will reveal the next new 3D Mario to come out later this year. That's the rumor, but people add other little details and push that as the rumor, and so they're actually kind of misleading people about what's going on. Other people have said that Attack the Backlog has said this is happening, and he hasn't. He has offered some level of corroboration to this rumor, because he has said he has heard something is coming. Those are his words. Something is coming. He does not know what the something is. He has not gotten clarity yet. That's all he's heard. However, the main source for this rumor is Nash Weedle, who, yes, if you take a look, if you watch his Partida Zeros, if you look at his Twitter timeline, you will see he has leaked many things in the past, things that you would never guess or predict, like Virtual Boy coming to Nintendo Switch Online, and it comes to fruition. It is eventually announced. That said, he does not have a perfect track record, nearly no insider does, so still take this with a grain of salt. But people are freaking out about a Direct happening this week because Nash Weedle, in a couple different podcasts with Attack the Backlog, has talked about how he's heard about this from multiple different sources he has. His source that told him about a 3D Donkey Kong game being in the big April Switch 2 Direct last year instead of 3D Mario has also indicated to him about this 3D Mario project coming out this year. That's a strong source. Yes, Nash did also put out that rumor that 3D Donkey Kong would be in the Direct instead of 3D Mario, the one from last year. But initially, Nash had multiple sources indicating February and multiple sources indicating March. It seems like there's been a debate happening behind the scenes. That's been the implication. However, in a more recent show, Nash did say that one more source that had indicated March previously actually shifted their stance and has told him they believe it's happening in February. And so because of this, a lot of people are now asking about a big Direct happening this week because, well, next week is the Pokemon Presents, so you would think if there's still going to be another Nintendo Direct this month, it would be this week and not the same week as the Pokemon 30th anniversary celebration. But do I believe this big General Direct is happening this week? And my answer is nuanced, which is why I'm asking people to try and listen actively with understanding here. I'm not saying no, but I'm also not saying yes. And there are three things in all these different conversations I've tried to point out repeatedly. 1. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence to believe. I think you'd have a conversation about extraordinary claims because, well, they're extraordinary and they are interesting, and if there is some evidence, I think it does make it worthy of conversation, but the evidence needs to be extraordinary in order to believe it. So that's one thing I've tried to point out multiple times, and that extends to this epic, huge Nintendo Direct rumor. But another thing I've tried to point out multiple times we got a partner showcase this month. And if you look at the history of Nintendo Directs throughout the Switch era over the last 8 years or so, whenever we've gotten some kind of partner showcase, be it the full or the mini, they have come in place of there being a bigger direct during that time period. In other words, if we're just looking at the history of Nintendo Direct presentations, then that would suggest, based off this recent partner showcase, that we're probably not going to get another bigger direct until the summer. However, over this last year, we have seen Nintendo handle Nintendo Directs in a very unusual way. They've been throwing out all kinds of directs all the time, at times you wouldn't necessarily expect. Last year, we had the Nintendo Direct sandwich, the big March Direct for Switch 1, and then not even a week later, a giant General Direct that was over an hour long about Switch 2. Or we've also gotten more game-specific directs than any other prior time over this last year. So because of this new era getting into Switch 2, Nintendo does seem to be handling directs differently than before. So even though we have this history of partner showcases replacing a bigger direct for that time period, because of these recent happenings of Nintendo handling things in a seemingly somewhat random way, I do think that provides some level of optimism here that maybe there could be something else. But the third point I have made consistently early on in all these conversations is that the rumor is February through March. While there may be some shifting of sources and when they think this is going to happen, that is the window. February through March. So if it doesn't happen in this 1 week of February, that doesn't mean the rumor is false. Personally, when it comes to things like this, I try to not operate with assumptions one way or the other. I try. Obviously, everyone has their own biases. We're all human. And I also think it needs to be understood that when we're talking about rumors or leaks, information about products that are not officially announced, that are in development, in other words, things are changing and developing behind the scenes, that inherently means predicting the timing is not going to be easy. Because there are going to be shifts. We know about this. We've heard about different Nintendo Directs changing, games get pushed or delayed and all that stuff. So even if you 100% believe in the sources, you should not 100% believe in the rumor for it to happen at a particular specific point in time. Some of you may point out, well, Nate the Hate is pretty consistent with Nintendo Directs when they're about to happen. And that is true. In recent history over the last few years, Nate the Hate has done this. And you wanna know why? It's because he doesn't talk about it until shortly before it happens. In fact, usually, there are several other insiders that have already talked about a direct happening during a particular time, and then Nate the Hate comes out and corroborates that information shortly before it's about to happen. And the reason for that? It's because he's very careful about these things, and he doesn't say it until he's very certain. Why might that be? Because, well, quite frankly, we've been burned before. We go back to 2024, we heard there was supposed to be the Switch 2 announcement in March of 2024. Nate the Hate had heard about this presentation happening. He said he heard it was about to happen. I personally had heard something similar. And then a week later, several different outlets said it wasn't happening. Now, people who don't understand how these things work might just assume that Nate the Hate was just saying something that was based off something fake. But as I'm sure most people will agree, Nate the Hate is proven to have very good, reliable sources. What makes more sense is that there were plans, there were changes behind the scenes, and so that's why that information was off. Which would explain now he's more careful until he's very, very certain something is absolutely imminent and about to happen. So with this all in mind, what do I think about a direct this week? It might happen. However, there's no clear, obvious signs that it is going to happen. Yeah, Nintendo right now is being a little quiet, and I do think after last week, Nintendo needs to do something, and I think what happened last week is actually extremely interesting. So if you weren't paying attention, Nash Weedle, actually the day before the Sony State of Play, basically PlayStation's version of a Nintendo Direct, he talked about how there is a 2D God of War in development, and it could come to multiple platforms, including Nintendo Switch 2. This was said the day before the Sony State of Play. And what made this rumor really interesting is that Nate the Hate was asked about this rumor, and he said he had actually heard similar conversations that this 2D God of War might be made multi-platform, but he said he just heard those conversations. He was not sure if that was going to be a finalized plan to bring it to multiple platforms, including the Switch 2. But on top of that, RGT85, who has actually been skeptical about Nash Weedle, actually corroborated this information and said he heard from his own personal reliable source, separate from Nate the Hate, that God of War, this 2D God of War, is going to happen, is multi-platform, and would be coming to Nintendo Switch 2. So Nash Weedle's rumor had a fair bit of corroboration. Now, this God of War game was actually confirmed literally the next day in the Sony State of Play, which I find to be a very interesting coincidence that Nash Weedle brings this up right before it's announced. There have been other Sony State of Plays where he could have talked about it then, but he didn't. He talked about it right before it was announced. However, it was not announced for Switch 2, so some people think that the rumor is false. I think it just means, well, maybe they just didn't decide to announce it for Switch 2 yet. We'll see. But honing in on what this Sony State of Play last week means for the Nintendo Direct, I watched this presentation, and, well, after the fact, because I'm, in general, not as interested in PlayStation things as I am Nintendo, but I did watch through this presentation eventually, and when I saw it, I actually came away from it feeling, wow, this is a pretty good presentation. There are a lot of games here I'm really excited about, and right now, the way things have been presented by PlayStation, it's looking like the PlayStation 5 is a way more interesting console to have in 2026 than the Nintendo Switch 2. Now, this is a Nintendo channel. I am a hardcore Nintendo fan. I would not say I'm a hardcore PlayStation fan. I like PlayStation, but my heart does belong to Nintendo. So when I say that, I feel like that should carry some extra weight here. I'm not saying that as some sort of attempt at rage bait to get views. Notice how I didn't mention anything negative about Nintendo with my headline or my thumbnail, because I don't believe in that. I think that's unethical, even though I do know that would generate way more views. But I do honestly believe this. I do honestly believe that right now, by this point in the year, Sony has done a much better job of getting people interested in PlayStation than Nintendo has done for their Switch family of systems, especially the Switch 2. The partner showcase was okay. I think they did show off a lot of pretty cool third-party games, but I've also made the point that the partner showcase, when I saw these third-party games, they looked noticeably worse than how they would play on PlayStation, for example, and, you know, that's kind of a given, because the Switch 2 is not as powerful, but I do gotta say, there are times when the third-party games hold up really well. I look at Final Fantasy VII Remake, and that game holds up really well. If all games looked kind of like that, or on that level compared to the other versions, I'd be fine with that, and I wouldn't be feeling like I have to play it elsewhere. But even the Rebirth trailer did not look good in the partner showcase. However, they did put out a trailer afterwards that looked better, that was supposedly for Switch 2, so it's like they used an older build, which I don't think it sold the game well in the partner showcase, but the actual trailer listed on Nintendo's YouTube page looks a lot better. If the game looks like that, I will happily play Final Fantasy VII Rebirth on my Switch 2. But I look at the Resident Evil situation. The game does not look that good to me on Switch 2. I'm not saying it looks terrible, and I do think there can be improvements by the time it does come out. We've seen this multiple times before. But I saw the Resident Evil trailer in the Sony State of Play, and it was a new trailer with new information that was way more interesting, and the game did look better, obviously. And just right now, I've been playing a lot of Resident Evil on my PlayStation because all the Resident Evil games are readily available. They are not on Nintendo. Yes, they're coming out with 7, 8, and 9 on release day, but there aren't all these different Resident Evil games to play at a huge discount and lead up to release for Requiem. It is the case on PlayStation. And so the point I'm getting at here is that right now, Sony's just kind of doing a better job of keeping me interested in my PS5 than Nintendo is keeping me interested in my Switch 2. I don't care about the Animal Crossing update. I'm not an Animal Crossing fan. I think Animal Crossing is great, but I'm just not going to play it for hundreds of hours. It's just not my type of game. Mario Tennis Fever is a Mario Tennis game. I think it's probably a good Mario Tennis game, but it's a Mario Tennis game at $70. Pokopia coming out in March. I've been hot and cold with this one. Recent previews actually are making me feel a bit more positive on it, but my mixed excitement for Pokopia isn't really enough to get me hyped about my Switch 2 for the beginning of the year. And also, Tomodachi Life has no Switch 2 announcements announced up to this point, and is also not my type of game. So through the first 4 months of the year, Nintendo's not really offering anything that's extremely interesting to me personally. I'm sure for those who are into Animal Crossing and Tomodachi Life and stuff like that, it's probably fantastic for you, and I'm happy for you. But I don't think my opinion is a rare opinion. I think Nintendo legitimately has not showcased offerings that are exciting a big part of the Nintendo fan base for the early part of 2026. And I'm not saying this to be negative, again, I'm just telling you because I do think it's the truth. But I've also said multiple times already, by this point, I think looking at how Sony has done things so far, it does kind of feel like Nintendo should be a bit pressed here to do something to excite a big, important part to their fan base, their core audience. I don't think the partner showcase is enough, and I think if we have to wait until June or July, then that would be a terrible thing for building momentum for the Switch 2. Will Nintendo be able to recover? Probably. I'm not here trying to say Nintendo Switch 2 is going to be a failure. I strongly doubt that. If Nintendo doesn't have anything cool at all or interesting to announce until the summertime, they will still probably be totally fine. But I do think it will hurt them at least in terms of sales for these next few months until they start bringing the hype. So going into this week, I do think it would be very beneficial of Nintendo to have a big direct, as has been rumored this week. I think if they do announce the next Monolith Soft title and the next new 3D Mario, that would do wonders to appealing to the core Nintendo fan base that may not find the current offerings for the early part of the year that interesting, and Nintendo would steal away some of that attention that's currently focused heavily on PlayStation right now. So I do think it will be beneficial to have a big direct this week for that reason. That said, Nintendo might not care. Nintendo might be completely okay with a lot of their core fan base just kind of feeling like other platforms are more interesting right now, until they decide to do a direct, and maybe we only have to wait until March, which wouldn't be that big of a deal. I do think when you look at the games that are currently announced and what we know about release dates, well, in terms of the first party things, we don't know about any Switch 2 offerings beyond March. Like, yes, there's Tomodachi Life in April, but that is a Switch 1 title with currently no announcements for enhancements for Switch 2. So I do think, just looking at those release dates, it does seem to suggest that Nintendo is going to have some more announcements by that point, which may mean, yes, a bigger direct, but also Nintendo could turn around and just give us like a trailer for Yoshi and the Mysterious Book on Mario Day, give us a release date for May, and then if that happens, then at that point I am going to be thinking, wow, we're going to wait until the summertime before we get a bigger presentation from Nintendo. So yes, I do have a little bit of a concern that Nintendo may opt to coast here until the summertime, but if I had to place my bets, no, I don't think that's what's actually going to happen. I do think there is merit to this rumor. I do think there probably will be a general direct sometime in this window between February and March. I don't know if it'll be this week. Maybe it will be, maybe it won't be. I'm just sticking to the window of time, February through March. At some point in this window, I think it's going to happen. And again, I think it's going to happen. I don't know it's going to happen. And so that's where I stand. If there's nothing this week, I'm going to be looking ahead to the Pokemon 30th anniversary. We're going to get the reveal for Generation 10, and I think that's actually going to be really interesting. And we have heard positive previews for Pokopia, so that may be something I'll be playing my Switch 2 in March. So at least from a Pokemon perspective, we have reason to believe things are going to be interesting over the next few months. But I still ultimately think there's going to be more. What do you all think, though? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I will see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.